Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is the last part, or fifth video in our 5-part series covering knives. This is Quintin
and Dylan
from Openrange Shooting Sports. Today we're going to be covering deployment as well as locks or actions, or how your knife stays in place while you're using it. So firstly, we're going to cover deployments, or how your knife gets out of your hand or whatever it's being held into action. So firstly, sheaths. Sheaths are honestly one of the faster ways to get out a knife. So, like this K-bar here, if I can get it in place. Since it's a fixed blade, it literally rests in a sheath on your belt, inside your waistband, whatever, and then you just pull it out. That easy. There are several different kinds of sheaths, most common being either Kydex or plastic, like what this K-bar was residing in, or in a leather, like what this Harley Davidson has. There are some advantages and disadvantages to it. Leather, like we said in our last video, does swell a lot with moisture. Plastic, though, is great, though, if you are encountering high temperatures, like if you're even in a fire, for example, your sheath can actually melt, believe it or not. But again, it is a pretty fast way to deploy your knife. Then next up, we have thumb studs, or basically the original way, so to speak, to open up your knife. So this is what you're going to find on the vast majority of knives on the market. You have two little studs on either side of the blade. They literally push open to bring out your knife. That is it.
Alright, next we got our wave openers, which are very popular in Emerson designs. Basically, when this knife is in your pocket, when it starts to deploy, it will actually catch on the inside of your pocket, and then as you pull out, it will deploy itself. It's probably one of the faster manual openings on the market right now. It's about as fast as fixed blades are, which is another great option because you can conceal a larger knife inside your pocket and have a really good deployment whenever you need it.
It's true. And then we go to our thumb nick, so to speak. This was around even before the thumb studs were out. But basically, you have a small part of the blade that's cut out that you literally just pull out the nail on your finger. And that's how you open up the knife. It's kind of fallen out of favor because, especially with the advent of the thumb studs and a lot of different ways to open your knife, it's not really common anymore. And especially, if you like me and you chew off your fingernails, you don't have anything to pull out your knife with. So that could be a good option, if you're going as low profile as possible, but it's not the most effective means of getting out your knife.
You typically find that on your old-time knives, which are a lot of usually carried, just because it's just your style of time. It's probably the slowest opening mechanism, because you have to pull it out, all find your thumb nick, and then deploy it. And it's not meant for speed by any means. But it's very minimalistic if you ever simple knife.
Cheaper that way, too.
Up next, we have our thumb holes, which is basically a lot of Spydercos have this. It's very popular in their brand. It's kind of similar to a thumb stud, but you actually have this hole kind of cut out, so you actually can put your thumb just enough into it to be able to deploy it. It's probably about as fast as a thumb stud. It does give you a larger area to grab onto, which is kind of neat, and it actually will help if you ever need to do really deep cuts or piercing cuts and come down. Isn't going to give you kind of resistance. Whereas on your thumb stud or your thumb disc, whenever you need to pierce in, this thumb stud could actually hinder you before you can actually start to cut down. So you need to kind of be aware of that as well. I think that's a really neat design in the way they did the thumb hole opening mechanism, just because it does kind of restrict how far you can actually pierce your knife into like a box.
Really opens up options too. I know some white water rafters that they actually put a piece of lanyard or 550 cord into that hole there, and in a bad situation, they just pull it out. You can even zip tie around this hole and, just like the wave feature, open it up in your pocket as you want to pull it out. So it's probably one of the more versatile options to open it way.
Alright, so up next we have our plunger or button opening mechanisms, where basically you have an external button where you just push it in and it deploys out. Kind of neat. It's Locket is pretty good. It's a little bit faster, but you need to know your law before you start carrying these kinds of knives. Whenever Switchblades were outlawed a long time ago, they were all button operated. So the button mechanism is kind of interesting when it comes to the laws on that. So you do need to consult your lawyers before you actually decide to carry a push open knife.
An interesting note about that is not all push button or piston activated knives are automatic. There are some out there that don't have a spring in it that you can buy, but not all are. One comes to hand, I think it's the Hogue knives, the X series or EX series. They're not automatic knives. Some of them are manual, and it's still a piston lock. But it's still pretty effective and it's easy to use. And then what's next? We got the proprietary locks. I don't want to mess with the volley song because I don't know volley songs like going here. But your proprietary locks are pretty interesting. So for example, right here we actually have what's called the Axis lock by Benchmade. You guys have probably seen this featured a lot in our other videos. But Axis lock is a pretty interesting lock because it's literally just a bolt, a steel bolt that holds the tang of the knife, or basically the rearmost part of the blade, into place with a spring. There are other proprietary locks out there. I think SOG has something very similar to this called a Hawk lock or something like that.
I'm not too sure.
Maybe, I'm not sure. But there are some knives that feature this kind of lock or proprietary type locks that you don't see very often except for those brands.
Alright, so last up we have our Valley songs, which is kind of one of my personal favorites. Now, it's all kind of really an art form in how you actually open this knife, just because you have an open blade that is actually deployed just by you doing a perfect manipulation to be able to deploy correctly. They are kind of outlawed too. They have been for a while, so you consult your lawyers. If you do end up purchasing one, they are still kind of legal to own, it's not legal to carry. But do make sure you pick up a trainer before you start trying to play with these. I've cut myself quite a few times just doing simple manipulation things like that. Just kind of be careful. But they are really, really neat, and they are a really great art form to have pressure breaths and things like that. But they're a really good option if you kind of want to get into that art form.
And the last one we have on the table is your OTF. Basically, you push most OTFs, that is. This is actually a Benchmade Infidel. It's a double action OTF. But most OTFs will either feature a plunger lock or something very similar to this, where you literally push the switch forward, pushes out the knife, right, with a spring. So this knife is actually retained by a spring right now, a very strong spring, that's held in place by this switch. To bring it back, it's the same motion, just bring it back. Some knives, like I think your Paragons, that are very similar in this design, are not double action. You will need to push it out first and then pull back with a separate lock.
Right.
But OTFs are still pretty fast. Most of them do feature a lock very similar to that. But yeah, for the most part, they are pretty fast. Again, I would probably say though, the fastest on the table, other than fixed blades, are going to be your wave knives. Especially that's why Emerson is so popular in the tactical knife community, because they open up faster than an automatic. Instead of reaching in your pocket, pulling it out, and then finding a button or a switch, it's literally as you pull out, the knife opens up. Then, of course, you have your fixed blades that are essentially completed knives that pull them out of the sheath. Somebody that works here, one of our co-workers, he put this in perspective once for us. Basically, a folding knife is a knife that's broken. So, even though it's smaller, easier to conceal, or more convenient to carry around, it's a broken blade. While fixed blades, they're going to be stronger and they're going to be, again, faster to deploy, especially depending on your sheath. But since we covered up our deployments, let's go next to, what was it, locks? Lockups. Alright. And now we're covering locks. Let's go to the simplest one, and that is the fixed bladed option. Basically, there is no lock present. The vast majority of your fixed blades are going to literally be one solid piece of steel. There are some out there, like if you've ever seen the Rambo movies, he actually has a hollow handle to it, but most of them actually start right there, the blade that is, and extend all the way through the handle towards the tip there. Fixed blades are going to be your strongest locks because it's obviously one piece of steel rather than a broken piece of steel that folds. You also have a lot of different variances and sizes. So with folding knives, you're kind of limited as far as the size because you have to be able to fit the lock in there. With fixed blades, it's literally just a piece of steel. So you can go anywhere from a very small CRKT like we have here to something large like this K-bar.
Alright, so our first lock mechanism we really want to talk about is our liner locks. I don't know if you can see this, but inside here you kind of have this piece of steel that kind of is lined up that actually will lock the blade into place. And to be able to close it, you have to push that little piece of steel kind of down and out of the way to be able to close it. As it deploys, the spring steel will kind of want to come up, and then it will engage into place, so it will lock it up. Like Quintin said, it is a broken piece of steel. It's broken, more or less, just because you do only have that small amount of blade. Most times when knives fail, it's due to locking mechanisms, so you want to pick your locking mechanisms really carefully. Your liners are your most common in the world, just because it's really, really easy to do, and it kind of gives you that option to do double-sided Q10 and things like that. Now, comparatively to a frame lock, you'll be able to see where the actual frame will actually lock into place. Where you, same exact thing, you kind of push that down and out of the way to close it, and as it deploys out, the whole frame will actually come into place. So it's actually a little bit wider, and actually will give you a little bit more positive lockup, which is really, really great. So that way you can lock it perfectly and give it a little bit less torsion to be able to move.
This specific lock too, this frame lock here on this Lion steel is pretty cool because some frames actually have where it may be aluminum engaged against steel or titanium engaged against steel. This one is actually steel on steel. And if you look close enough, you'll be able to see where you can actually switch out the locking part that engages against the knife. So if that part ever wears out, you can literally just switch it out very easily. But that kind of segues into our compression locks. Compression locks are really cool. They're mainly found in Spydercos, but they're basically a reverse liner lock. So your liner lock is traditionally found in the front of the knife if you're holding it facing towards someone. The compression lock is actually on the rear of it, where the spine of the blade is located. This, instead of engaging the front of the tang, is actually engaging the rear of the tang. So that allows for a little bit stronger lockup. It also makes it easier to disengage. So you can literally just push down with your finger on the back there, and it lowers just like that.
Keeps all your fingers out of the way. You've been noticing me with my struggle of opening the liner and the frame lock. Fingers right in the way whenever the blade starts to close. The compression allows you to get your hand out of the way of the blade, so that way you can actually close it without having to worry about your fingers.
Compression locks are really cool though. And they're taking off a lot more Spydercos, even some other companies have started manufacturing compression locks. And they're looking to be a promising replacement to your standard liner lock there. And then that brings us into
our access locks. Back to our whole getting your fingers out of the way. Instead of having to reach down in there and try to find it, Benjamin actually developed this little ball bearing kind of system where it's just this little rod that you actually can just move out of the way to disengage the lock. And then whenever you start to deploy the knife, it'll actually roll up and engage into your really nice solid lockup. I'm really, really happy and really love the access locks just because it can give you that easier access to be able to open and close your knife without getting your hands kind of in the way. I think they did a really good job at designing this style one.
They're also very strong. I forget what video it is, but Benchmade actually has a video where they take I think it's a Model 300, and it's anywhere from 500 to maybe even a ton to actually break the lock. It's a pretty sweet locking mechanism. It's actually so popular that a lot of different companies have started manufacturing their own. Like SOG has something out there very much like it. Spyderco has the bolt lock, which is very similar to it, as well as Cold Steel. They formerly had one, but now they actually have basically taken off on the liner lock concept, or excuse me, the frame lockback concept. So the lockback was around a long time. It's been around basically since pocket knives were manufactured. It's very easy to manufacture and very easy to open and close. It's literally just a bar of steel, in the back of the spine of the blade that is pushed forward or pushed back by a spring. This allows the rearmost part of the tang on the actual blade to be engaged by the locks. Some lockbacks will actually have a piece of steel that separates the blade itself from the lock. This allows you to have a little more wear and tear on the blade without compromising the lock-up of the knife. But lockbacks are pretty popular. They're also very strong. You do have to be a little bit careful closing them though. Kind of like Dylan pointed out with the liner lock there, you can actually get your fingers in the way as you close the knife. Nonetheless though, it is a strong lock. They're very affordable too and very popular.
Next we're talking about the piston-driven ones, or the push-button locks. It's very, very similar to kind of get your hands out of the way. You just kind of disengage your lock, push down, but it does kind of give you that spring tension, so you are fighting a little bit of spring tension to get that knife back into place and actually get a firm lock up. Usually these knives come with a secondary lock, like on top here, where it'll help engage that lock a little bit more, so that way if you ever have this in your pocket, it won't ever engage, it won't ever actually pull it into you. Just engage the secondary lock or the primary lock before you actually get your opening mechanism. So that's kind of a neat idea too. You will be fighting spring tension on that, but it's not nothing too major to have to worry about. It still folds up fairly easily.
You find that a lot on automatic knives. There are some knives out there that are manual piston, but you'll again find them a lot on automatic knives. Again, like this actual OTF right here, this is a Benchmade Infidel. This one is driven by a spring instead of a piston, but it's still an automatic concept. You actually push a switch forward, that engages a spring and then pushes forward the blade. There are some out there that aren't double action OTFs like this one is. Double action meaning everything can be done in the same switch. I can bring back and forth the knife in the same switch. There are some OTFs out there that use the same lock, but it's actually a little bit different. It's called a single action OTF, where you push out, spring engages, but then you actually have to use a separate lock to bring it back. OTFs, they aren't the strongest and the tightest lockup, but they are pretty fast.
They do have to be free moving in order for that spring to actually pull it out correctly. So you do have to kind of worry about getting sand or anything like that in those kind of knives. You can get that binding up in there in the spring, so you have to worry about that. Lockups, like I said, it's going to be a little bit wiggly. That's just common with OTFs.
Speaking of springs, we do also have the, what is this called?
It's a slip joint, or slip joint. Yeah, slip.
Yeah.
Slip joint.
Slip joints. This was actually one of the first pocket folding knives out there. Same concept as the OTF, except done a lot differently. It's actually a spring that just pushes against the blade there, and you bring it back and forth. You can really notice the spring tension when you bring the knife back, because sometimes it will actually close on its own. So you do have to watch for your fingers there, especially since this isn't something that actually locks the blade in place. It's just basically spring pressure that pushes the knife back and keeps it from going on your fingers. But there is a strong possibility of closing on your fingers. The good thing about this is, though, a lot of countries out there that don't allow pocket knives or fixed pocket knives will allow the what was it called again? Slip joints. I'm sorry, it's passing me on. The slip joint knives. So we'll allow the slip joint knives, especially in a lot of the states that are pretty restrictive on knives as well in the United States, like California, maybe even Massachusetts. They're again, just like in England, yeah, you can't carry a fixed option or a locking option. So this is great if you live in one of those states or one of those countries where legally you're very limited on what knives you can carry.
Lastly, I think all left is just the latch lock, which is only found in your valley songs just because they are kind of free opened. Basically, the only thing that locks the knife into place is this little latch that actually just folds in and it's held in by pressure. Some of them are spring-loaded, kind of like this Morpho. You just kind of push it in and the spring will actually help you get it out. So you'll actually start doing all your fun tricks and flips and things like that. But to lock it up, all you gotta do is really just push this little latch over to engage it properly. I think that should be it for all the locks.
Yeah, that's about it. What's your favorite lock?
My favorite, I really like the Axis lock. I've been a really big fan of Benchmade over the years. You really can't go wrong with your frame and your liner just because
They're classy. They work.
they are classy, they work, they're really minimalistic, and most times they're just a lot easier to find knives with them, so it's kind of pre-built into how to open them. You really want to find knives that actually have similar locks if you're wanting to think about consistency, because if you start carrying knives that you have different opening mechanisms, you really kind of have to be like, oh, I got to do this to open this knife, or oh, I have to do this to close this knife. You really kind of want to think about that right before you start purchasing a bunch of different types of knives, but find out what works best for you and what you like as far as preference. You really can't go wrong with any of them. They'll all do the job.
There you go. That's what it's all about. Alright, well thanks again for tuning in, guys. Again, this is the final video of our 5-part series covering knives. Today we covered again deployments and different locking mechanisms. Please like, subscribe, and share to your friends so we can hopefully continue on series like these. And again, my name is Quintin.
This is Dylan.
And thanks for tuning in to Openrange Shooting Sports, and we'll see you later.